Welcome to another episode of the Arenas podcast, the analysis of and responses to extremist narratives, where we explore the depths of extremist narratives across Europe. I'm your host, Firdaus Alawi, and today we are diving headfirst into the complexities between France's far-right identity and gender.
The French Republic is a country of 68 million inhabitants in Western Europe, though it also includes overseas regions and territories in the Americas and the Atlantic, the Pacific and Indian Oceans. In 1940, France was invaded and quickly defeated by Nazi Germany, and the country was divided into different zones. A new authoritarian regime under the leadership of Marshal Philippe Pétain collaborated with Germany and ruled the unoccupied territory, commonly referred to as Vichy France. Meanwhile, the government in exile was led by Charles de Gaulle, who returned to France after the Allied invasion on D-Day and oversaw the recapture of the French territory. France was later proclaimed as one of the winners of the Second World War and became a founding member of the United Nations, where it gained veto power as one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. In 1946, a new constitution established the Fourth Republic, and the Glorious 30 began, a 3-decade-long period of economic growth in France. This period was also characterized by colonial conflicts, with the French defeat and withdrawal from Vietnam in 1954, and the long-lasting Algerian War ending with Algerian independence in 1962. The turmoil of the Algerian War led to a political crisis in France, where Charles de Gaulle returned to establish the Fifth Republic in 1958, including a strengthened presidency, which he would hold for 11 years. This is the constitution still in place today. By the end of the 1960s, a new influential far-right was established in France that focused on cultural war, commonly known as Nouvelle Droite. To promote these ideas intellectually, the ethno-nationalist think tank Grèce was founded by Alain de Benoist, defending a conservative revolution and opposing multiculturalism. In 1972, Front National was founded by Jean-Marie Le Pen together with former supporters of French Algeria, in an attempt to unify the French nationalist movement. They attacked symbols of the left and attributed the losses of the colonial empire to Charles de Gaulle. The party was a marginal political force during its first decade, but became a major force of French nationalism since the middle of the 1980s, with Jean-Marie Le Pen advancing to the second round in the presidential election in 2002. In the 21st century, Jean-Marie's daughter, Marine Le Pen, has attempted to reform the party, soften its image and distance it from its past by abandoning its anti-Gaulle narrative and change the main ideology from national preference, an idea established by Grèce, to national priority, as the old wordings have become too controversial. Marine Le Pen was elected party leader in 2012 and distanced herself from her father by expelling him from the party. In 2018, Front National transformed into Rassemblement National, the national rally, today presidented by Jordan Bardella. In the European elections of 2024, the party gained 31% of the French votes, becoming a major actor of the European Parliament with 30 seats.
We are joined today by professor and researcher Martin Lefranc from the University of Orleans. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. Hello.
So before we start, I'd like to introduce you a bit more and for our listeners to know you a bit and like what your line of work is. So, Martin, you work on political history, France in the 20th and 21st century, and you focus on the extreme right in France, right?
Right, yes.
And some of your publications that you have, well, I'm not going to read them all, but one of them that sparked my interest was Memory of Fascism and the French extreme right. And it's interesting to me because of, well, France's history, but not only that, also our episode today, because we're going to work as well with a bit of that, or a bit of fascism in France, which is not talked about, in my opinion, as much as we should do it, no? So, to start off, Professor Lefranc, Martin, sorry, I would like to discuss the significance of the French identity. it is a fascinating blend of the political and the biological, with the former, so like the political, shaping the national community after the French Revolution, and the later, the biological, representing the physical embodiment, quote unquote, of the nation. Martin, could you explain on this concept a bit? How does this dual understanding of what is the French and France shape the current French right wing?
Yes, as you said, in France, the French Revolution played a key role in establishing a political definition of the nation. Basically, belonging to the national community was defined in legal terms by contractual and not by ethnic or cultural conceptions. And against France, the French Revolution played a key role in establishing a political definition of the nation. So basically, belonging to the national community was defined in legal terms by a contractual bond and not by ethnic or cultural conceptions. And against this political definition of the nation, several nationalist philosophers and movements use biological metaphor where the nation is a physical body threatened by degeneration, by decadence, or by the loss of identity. This biological conception of the nation is not unique to the far right, but it is one of its hallmarks. And to regenerate the nation, the far right adopts a program. They adopt a program aimed at protecting the national body from what they call foreign elements. For instance, since the 70s, the French far right considers immigration as the main threat to national cohesion. The main far right party, Le Front National, they established a causal link between immigration and unemployment. And in 1985, the Nouvelle Droite, the new right think tank, theorized the concept of a national preference, la préférence nationale, and this concept was aimed at providing a political platform for the right and the far right. And this concept is based on a narrative about immigrants of non-European origin. So their arrival in France is supposedly linked to open borders, to high salaries, to a generous welfare system, and to the fact that it is allegedly easy to obtain the French nationality. In this narrative, however, immigrants have no intention of integrating the national community. So to deal with them, we would have to reestablish blood law, to restrict access to social benefits for foreigners, and the Front National took on the national preference concept with la préférence nationale. It even became the main ideological hallmark of the party. So it shows this obsession with the loss of identity, of national identity.
Yeah, so the French, from what I have known and from what you are telling us, they have kind of like this, well, not the French, sorry, but like the French far right. They have this threat that they feel from the outside, and it makes sense because like it also aligns with, for example, the colonization of Algeria, where even though they were like Algeria was France, but the Algerians were not French, right? Yeah, so basically that, and in similar ways, we also have the weaponizing of the idea of like that migrants come here and don't adapt, like you said. Sorry. That migrants come here to France and don't adapt, and it's also used to bring in the topic of gender and the discussion of gender, which is what we're going to talk about now. That the French extreme right has a clear idea on the societal roles of men and women. So much so that the notion to return to the traditional values of society, where men dominate the public sphere and women the private one, began as early as with the suffragettes movement. Now, before diving in on this perspective of gender, I do want to mention and to link what we talked about before on how the immigrants are the threat to also gender, to this these gender roles that they want to attain. So nowadays, like in other European countries, the far right sees a threat to the core of masculinity from their point of view. We are seeing this crisis of masculinity with the masculinization of women and feminization of men as well. Could you, in this light of the complexity surrounding gender and far right, how do you perceive the evolution of gender dynamics within these movements?
Yes, as you said, the far right has always supported the binary biological conception of gender. Men and women are different. They have a different role in society. This conception is based on the theory of separate spheres, separation between the public sphere assigned to men and the domestic sphere assigned to women. And the Front National, they used to defend the idea of the family as the center of the nation. They used to defend the role of women as housewives, the role of women as educators of children and transmitters of traditional values. And today, several French anti-feminist influencers are promoting this conception, like, for instance, Julien Rochdy or Thais Discussion. And for them, feminism puts society in danger because it has, for instance, an impact on the birth rate. And they argue that feminism unfairly targets men who they consider as victims. So they call for this return to traditional values. And far right-wing politicians like Éric Zemmour also advocate for the reinstatement of the natural gender order, what he calls natural gender order. As for the Rassemblement National, formerly Front National, it is now less openly opposed to feminist achievements like the Veil law that decriminalized abortion. However, women play an increasing role in far-right movements. The main far-right party is led by a woman, Marine Le Pen, this is the Rassemblement National, and several nationalist influencers call themselves feminists, like Alice Cordier, the leader of Nemesis Group, and she argues that she fights for women's rights against the main threat to gender equality, which is allegedly Muslim immigration. Even some far-right figures like Marion Maréchal, who's close to Zemmour, or was close to Zemmour, she claims that only reactionary feminism would truly defend women.
Totally. This is what we know as female nationalism, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's, again, the same thing. The weaponizing of gender, of feminism, of women's issues, or like the women's fight, to promote this anti-migration agenda. Similar to this, we also find homonationalism. So what is really interesting about this is that among the three main threats to the nation, homosexuality is the first one and abortion the second, which makes sense given the history of the ideology. But somehow they tried to relate or to win over the LGBTQ plus community and feminism by, like you said, introducing a common threat, immigration. So Martin, how is it possible to be able to attract these demographics in France despite their apparent contradiction with their core values? Do they target them directly, or do they carry out different tactics to relate to the population? How does it go?
Yes, when it comes to sexual preference, the new Rassemblement National has been more recently making use of seemingly progressive narratives on LGBT rights. The former leader, Jean-Marie Le Pen, former leader of the Front National, used to make openly homophobic statements. And in contrast, his daughter, Marine Le Pen, who is the leader of the party now, she softened her words in order to attract more voters. And several key figures of the Rassemblement National, all men, have come out as gay, like Julien Coudoul, like Jean-Philippe Tanguy, Sébastien Chenu, or Florian Philippot before then. But it does not mean that the party has become a pro-LGBT. And for instance, it continues to spread transphobia. Since in France, the anti-feminist rhetoric is giving way to a transphobic rhetoric, which is being supported by certain sectors of feminism, particularly by women who were involved in the feminist movement in the 70s and who now identify as radical feminists or what we call trans-exclusionary radical feminists. So in France, there are feminists like Elisabeth Badinter and Caroline Fourest, who criticize what they refer to a transgenderist ideology, which they believe undermines biological women. And in this category, we can also find authors like Dora Muto and Marguerite Stern, who recently published a bestseller, what was a bestseller, whose name is Transmania, which was relayed in far right-wing circles. So to sum up, the French far right has reappropriated progressive narratives to claim itself the defender of women and gay people against the threat of immigration and the threat of trans people.
Mm-hmm. And to follow up with that, and later to wrap up the episode as well, could we talk a bit more about how do they attract these certain sectors of society? Like how or why do gay people feel like attracted to the far right movement in France, even though they have a homophobic history?
Maybe that is because this is kind of a personal answer, but maybe that's because left-wing movements do not consider this question as essential in their speeches, in their statements. Maybe that's why. And the far right, they go on that field because it is like quite unoccupied.
No, I totally get you, and it makes sense because it's not only useful to attract new voters, but also to further their agenda to justify in a way certain issues that there are in France, to like justify the hatred or their refusal of migrants, of the Muslim population in France. So it makes total sense to see them attracted to like this to the right wing of the political parties in France. So I think we don't have more time, unfortunately. So after diving into these all tangles into France far right identity, we will have to finish the episode here. Thank you again, Martin, for joining us and sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you.
And thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. And we will see you next time. Goodbye.
This podcast is part of the Arenas project, funded by the European Union Horizon Programme, under the Framework Programme for Research and Innovation, 2021 to 2027. Speaker voice, Gabriel Wahl.